Hey everybody, welcome to today's video where we're going to talk about how to use one of these. This is a Lloyd's bulk film loader, and if you're used to buying 35mm film cassettes like this in the store and you know how expensive those can be, a bulk loader like this and some reusable film cassettes or even some factory cassettes can save you a bunch of money. In today's video I'm going to show you how to do all of this stuff you can do with this film loader. First thing that we're going to do is understand that what I'm about to show you needs to be done in the dark. Whenever you buy bulk film, it's going to be 100 feet of film, give or take, and it's going to come on a spool like this of some size. It will be in a black plastic bag in either a metal tin or a cardboard box. Film like this, I'm using this because it was already ruined. This is like 1970s black and white motion picture stock, but if you take the film out of the black plastic bag in the light, you're going to ruin much of your film. So everything I'm about to show you has to be done in the dark, either in a black bag or in an interior room with no lights on. First thing that we're going to do is unscrew the Lloyd's loader, take out the handle, lift off the top. We're just going to drop the film right in so that the core is over the spindle. Open up the door. Actually lift this up a little bit so it can take out a short leader and feed it out through this little opening right here. Close. Lid. At this point we can now safely turn on the lights in the darkened room, and now we can start loading the film. One other thing that we can do, and I think is a good idea, is you can take the type of film that you loaded, which I know is, this is an old high sensitivity Pancro film, and you can write that on a piece of tape and put it on here. This way you can know just by looking what type of film you have and that it is in fact loaded with film. So now that we have this loaded, I'm going to show you how to load up a cassette with this. So we're going to hold this on its side. We're going to take out this knob, and the reason is because the knob fits through this hole and this one, so that's a locking mechanism, having the knob inside of in place. We're going to take our reloadable cassette and we're going to pop it apart into 3 pieces. I've got a length of masking tape. Masking tape is pretty much perfect for this. I'm going to pull out just a short little end of film here, and I'm going to attach the tape. Now you might be saying this is a long piece of tape, but you know what? Tape is cheap. Having a piece of tape attached to your film and get pulled off the spindle and jacking up your shutter because it got stuck on the shutter as the film was advancing, that's not cheap. So I'm going to make this tape long enough that it can completely wrap around the spindle and reattach to the other side of the film on the emulsion. That will give you a better assurance that this tape is going to stay in place, especially since winding it is going to jam it down there. Next, we're going to take the cassette housing, slide it over the spindle. Sometimes that happens where you put it together and the other side pops off. Especially with old cassettes like I use that have been used many, many times. Ouch. And do be careful, sometimes these have sharp edges. There we go. Okay, so this is what it should look like when it's assembled. This is the bottom of the loader, and the little knob part goes down towards the bottom. We're going to push this back in, close this the whole way. There we go. Next we're going to load the handle in. Now, if you have your Lloyd's, you can see over here, it's going to be hard to read on this video, how many turns of the handle you need to make to load up different lengths of film. So let's say, for instance, that you want to do a 10 exposure roll. You're just going to do a quick test roll to see how this performs in some condition. That's 13 turns of the handle. An 18 exposure roll is 19. 24 is 24, that's pretty easy to remember, and 36 exposures is 31 turns. You might be able to see in the relationship here how the thicker that the spool of film gets as you load it affects the number of turns of the crank. So we're just going to crank this until we get to however many roll exposures we want on the roll. I'm going to call that good. Now, that when we're done, we just lift this up, open the door, pull out the film. We're going to cut the leader, and we have now loaded our film. Now if you just use like 90s cameras that you can just place the end of the leader in, this is it. You are done here. If you use cameras from the 60s, 70s, 80s where you have the leader shape that looks more like this, there are a couple of things that you can do. Oftentimes, I will simply fold this over like that when I go to load it into the camera, or fold it the other way. And sometimes if the film, if you do this enough, will just crack and break. Now you have a leader shape. You don't have to cut any special shape into it, unless you're using old Leica 3 cameras and clones that do have to have a very long lip, tongue in front of them rather. So, but that's a pretty easy way to get out of having to cut a special shape into these. If you use a mix of cameras, you can just do this in the field when you need to. Okay, well that's really great, but like those reusable cassettes can get kind of spendy. And I mean, I have like 10 rolls of film at home I haven't used yet. So if you have black and white film like this that you're developing at home, or if you can ask your lab to give you the cassette roll, the empty cassette back with a little bit of film at the front of it, what you can do is reuse this for spooling. Now, one thing I've read people recommend doing this with double tape. If you put double-sided tape here on this side of it, then what you risk is when you put the bulk film down on top, if that double stick tape doesn't hold to this, but it does hold to the emulsion of the bulk film, you risk taking your double-sided tape over your shutter curtain. Not a good idea. If you're going to use double sticky tape, what you want to do is put it on the emulsion side of the reusable of the cassette you're going to be reusing, and then stick the back of the bulk film to the double stick tape. That way, if the tape tears off, either it's going to stick with the emulsion here and be fine, or it's going to be on the back of the film that's running through the camera, and it's not going to screw up your shutter, hopefully. I don't use double stick tape though. I will generally use either masking tape, which can be a little bit thick, or Scotch tape, just some standard clear-ish frosted tape. Now, put that over there. If you're going to go the frosted tape route, we're just going to feed this over the end here. Going to wrap this around this way. And tape is cheap, damaged shutter curtains are not. So when in doubt, wrap the tape a couple of times, and that's going to help make sure that even if this tape pulls off of the cassette you're reusing and comes with the end of the film, that because it's wrapped around and the sticky sides are facing themselves, it's less likely to damage your shutter. We're going to put that back inside, grab our handle, we're going to roll up a bunch of film, and there we go. We have spooled up our film using a factory cassette so that we can save a few bucks and just reuse film that we've already bought. So let me give you some tips to make the most out of using your Lloyd loader and so that you get the best results. The first one is when you are cranking your loader, hold it flat like this. And the reason is because of the way that the film is loaded in here. If you hold the film flat while you're pulling the film out this way to load it into the cassette, then the edges of the film, especially on the bottom here, are what's going to shake up and down against the as you're moving, right? It's what's going to get scratched. And this doesn't record any image, so who cares? However, if you are holding the loader so that this is the bottom, gravity risks pulling it down. Now this is a pretty empty roll, but you could scratch the back of some of your film, or if it's not spooled as tightly as this, it could rub up against the inside of this and get scratched. And so holding it flat is just a good way to protect your film quality. The next thing is going to be make sure that you keep the felt here clean, okay? Because if you get some dirt in the felt, then all of your film is going to be scratched. If you have a little piece of sand halfway down this piece of felt right here, and it just hangs out there, every roll of film that you spool through this loader is going to be filthy. So when it comes time to using this, you can just take a sheet of paper, as I will sometimes do, and just run a sheet of paper like the video script through there. I don't really recommend tape, because if the tape tears or damages your felt, you're in a similar situation. You could also use a compressed air blaster to try to blast any dust and dirt out of there. It's just a good preventative maintenance thing, not one that's worth waiting until you have damaged film to perform. The next tip I'm going to have for you is when you are reusing your cassette, grab some masking tape and write the type of film on it. If you put you can see here that this reusable, or this factory cassette rather, has the film information on it. If you take your masking tape and you put it here, and then you write the type of film you're using, and you have film windows on the back of your camera, you might be able to see what type of film you're using, which is pretty convenient to have out in the field. Also, another thing you can do when you have your plastic tub that's holding your cassette, take a long piece of masking tape that wraps almost all the way around it and record your film on that as well. That way, when you're out in the field, if you are using your film, if you're pushing or pulling it, or want to record any special notes, you have that masking tape that's on the tub that's much longer and has a lot of blank space to record notes. I'll show you what that looks like. Here's a standard roll that I had spooled up a few weeks ago. You can see it's GP3, 100 ISO, 36 exposures. I can kind of see that in some of my cameras, right? And then the cassette or tub rather, that it goes inside of has this length of masking tape on it, GP3 times 36. So when I'm out using this, if I want to say pulled to 25 ISO or something like that, I can do that. If I needed to tear this in half to take notes for something else, I've got a little bit of extra tape. So this is just a convenient way to have something there that can be useful. The next tip that I'm going to have for you is whenever you're recording information on your masking tape here, on your cassette, on your tub, wherever, is to use a permanent marker. I have dozens of these floating around because I lose them pretty often, but I like the Sharpies specifically because these are water resistant, which means if the tubs get wet when I'm out taking a hike, this isn't going to run. When I'm in the dark room, I can keep the tape that has this information on it on the outside of the developing canister. I can move it to the washing basin when it's done. I can stick this tape then onto the actual film while it's drying, so that the entire time that I'm using film, I can keep track of what it was, how many exposures, whether I pulled or pushed it, things like that. Extra space on the tape I can use to record the developer and concentration that I used, the time and things like that, so that data, because it's going to be written in permanent marker, is indelible. It doesn't run, it doesn't get messed up, and it gives me a future reference for what I was doing when I shot the film, so that I know whether my experiments or whatever I was doing worked or didn't work. And the last tip that I have is that after you've finished your film, you've completely used up your bulk spool, what you want to do is make sure that you take this masking tape that you were using. I usually put it on the last roll of film that I was spooling, but I take the handle and I put it in there, and then I close up the loader. Now this does two things. One, the handle's not going to get lost, and two, well, I heard it rattle a little bit. Hearing that rattle lets me know that it's in here. It's as a signal to myself. If I can hear the handle rattling inside of this, I know that there's no film inside of it. So this is just another means of communicating to my future self that this can be opened and used, and that it doesn't have film inside that I accidentally forgot to record on the outside of the body. Now, Lloyds are my personal favorite type of loader to use. However, they're not perfect, and there are some problems with them. So here are the problems that I know of with the Lloyds. They are a bit fragile. If you drop them, they can crack, and a cracked film, I've had a couple of these that have come through my hands over the years that have been cracked. You can fix it with tape and some black paint and things like that, but it's better just not to drop it. They are also a bit heavy. This one's pretty light. This is one that I bought new from Freestyle a few years ago, and it is a bit lighter than the older ones, but still, for the size, they're dense. Dust and dirt in the felt, as I mentioned, can scratch your film, and you might not even know that you have dust or dirt in your film and you have scratched emulsions for a while. And if you bulk spool 100 feet at once, which is like 19 rolls of film, give or take, then you're going to get 19 rolls of film that have scratches on the emulsion. That's not fun. I have had that happen before. It's awful. The felt on these can also wear out, and I've had to replace the felt on a couple of these over the years. They were very old ones. I mean, the felt was probably 40 years old. But over time, the felt on these can wear out, especially if they're used heavily. And the door locks also. This is the door lock loop right here. This is prone to breaking, and I've had a number of these that I've seen where this part has broken. And when that happens, it doesn't affect the overall usability, except that the door lock can come open. What the door lock is really for is to make sure that when the film is being spooled onto the cassette, this is a nice tight fit. If the lock is broken, this can open slightly, and that's going to fog your entire roll of film with light coming through here and getting onto the emulsion as you load it. And that can be kind of a frustration. And the last problem that the Lloyds have is with their little handles. These can easily get lost, and I have lost a few. I've had to buy replacements for them. But these can get lost, which is why it's important to have a good system for managing their location when you're not using, when you don't have film in here. When you do have film in these, because you're keeping the handle mounted in the bulk loader, I also will tape over the handle to make sure that it stays in place and doesn't get lost when there's film in here between loadings. But for all those problems, like I've said, the Lloyd's is my favorite type of bulk loader, and that's because they have some significant benefits. They have a very small footprint. This is a tiny, tiny little film loader, and especially compared to some of the other ones on the market. They are very easy to load and use. They are super, super simple. There's less film wasted on each roll because the amount of film you need to access when you load each roll of film through here is minimal. So you don't end up like with the Watson and the Weston and some of the other styles. They have a longer area of film that gets ruined when you finish spooling each cassette. So with some cameras, that ruined film can affect your last image when you bulk spool. That is not an issue with the Lloyds at all. And also, this is faster to use when spooling many rolls of film than some of the other models. These are just really easy to get into a rhythm with, and you can just bulk load your film really quickly. So that's the Lloyd loader. I hope that the process and the tips helped you very much. I will see you in the next video.